Okay, a lot of crazy shit happened while I wasn't making isms for 4 or 5 days, but there is one that was on the absolute top of the list. You see, when I was hanging out at home yesterday, I was talking to my brother Adler, and he decided to ask me what Victor Osimhen was doing in Turkey. I promptly told him that I thought he was in Saudi Arabia because that was the state of play a week ago and that transfer was basically all but confirmed, at which point he told me no, Victor Osimhen was in Turkey. And I think what we have here is one of those situations where somebody fucks up at their job so colossally, so massively, that it almost dodges the headlines, right? Like, we're looking at Victor Osimhen and we're oogling at the fact that somehow he's ended up getting loaned out to Galatasaray. And yet what we're not noticing is whatever Victor Osimhen's agent has done. Okay? Now I want to be very, 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 very transparent and clear on this. Victor Osimhen's one of the best strikers on the planet. Okay? Now, he had a down year last year. So did the entirety of the Napoli team. They were absolute dog water, hogwash, worst title defense you've ever seen from anybody ever. Victor Osimhen, that being said, if you make a list of the 10 best forwards on the planet, he's on it. He might even be able to creep into something inside of that. But he is definitely the type of player that a lot of teams that happen to be missing world-class or close to its center forwards would love to have. He was playing on an absolutely terrible team last year, and so the transfer market should be there, right? But the agent did not do his job properly. And it's probably not for the reason that you think, right? Because I'm not talking about the fact that the agent was not able to find a move this offseason. I'm talking about the fact that there was never a move to be found this offseason for Victor Osimhen. All right, I need you to put your tinfoil hat on here and think about this for a second. We have now reached the apex of what FFP is supposed to be. The problem is that the transfer window that we've known for the last couple of years and then well on before that into the beginning of time when the first players started getting paid, that transfer window now no longer exists. There is a limit, a hard, dangerous point deduction giving limit on how much these teams can spend for particular transfers, which means that Napoli is sitting there expecting to get a certain amount of money for a player the level of Victor Osimhen, which if he was on the market 3 years ago, they would have been able to get for him. Absolutely no questions asked, absolutely no problem. And that money is just not out there for it, for it to be spent for Victor Osimhen to go anywhere. And what makes this particularly tragic is this had been brewing for a couple of years. After Napoli won the Italian title 2 years ago, a lot of people thought that Victor Osimhen was on the way out. Napoli was able to keep him around by giving him like a new contract in last December that significantly increased his wage, basically. But the plan was always that Victor Osimhen was going to leave at some point. He was not somebody that was going to be a career striker at Napoli. And you'd heard teams bandied about, whether it was Manchester United, whether it was Chelsea, obviously, because they're literally buying everyone, whether it was Real Madrid, because they are still lacking kind of a natural center forward player for everything else to revolve around. I mean, look no further than this goal article to list out, PSG or any elite English club that would have potentially been interested in Victor Osimhen. To be perfectly honest, everybody except for Manchester City would probably be interested in Victor Osimhen as a potential upgrade to their central striker. I don't care how much you love Darwin Nunez. I think Victor Osimhen's probably better than Darwin, right? Like, he is in this category of a proven goal sniper. And for the last couple of years, the agitation has grown and grown in terms of him wanting to move on. And the agent should have taken advantage of that. And that's what's crazy to me. You see, in the United States, right, in the NFL and the NBA, whatever, there are things called collective bargaining agreements, right? Whether it be the NBA, they all have players' associations. Okay, the players' associations go and they say, okay, this is where the money is going to be distributed. But basically, you can see when there's going to be, like, based off of the way these contracts are set up, when a new TV deal is going to kick in, the salary cap is going to change, basically. And that means that, players are going to be able to get paid more money. And agents will look way into the future and go, well, we're going to sign a 4-year contract right now instead of a 5-year contract because that's the first year that this new kind of TV revenue kicks in. And so you'll be able to make significantly more money if your contract ends there, and you'll be able to pick up, more years. Or you'll enter into the free agency when all of these teams get a bunch of kind of extra money to spend, right? That is something that very regularly happens in various U.S. sports because of the salary cap and everything else. Well, like it or not, there is a version of a salary cap in European football right now. And so it is wise for agents to take this entire Victor Osimhen lesson as a word of warning, because there are going to be some summers where Kylian Mbappe is not being purchased by Real Madrid, where Manchester United has more money to spend, where Chelsea hasn't already spent its $5 billion it happens to be sitting on top of, and where a couple of clubs are looking to buy that are potentially interested. And then there's going to be windows where none of that is true, right? And you end up with the situation Victor Osimhen was at, right? Which is he just signed a new contract in December on the understanding he'd be allowed to leave for a certain amount of money. All of that makes sense. That is a pretty normal agreement between club and player that we've seen over, a lot of the past, forever, basically. But then the Saudi Arabia move becomes the only viable move because that's the only team that has the ability to get near the asking price and to pay his wage. I mean, it wasn't crazy. It was like $75 million that the Saudi team was actually looking to offer, which for a player of Victor Osimhen's quality is pretty crazy. I mean, considering the new deal had a buyout clause of 120 million euros, that is the amount of money they were expecting to be able to get for him. And even up to a couple of years ago, maybe even last year, that's something that you would spend. They said, hold on, I think De Laurentiis, who is the person making these decisions at Napoli, had said in the summer of 2023 it would take 200 million euros for Victor Osimhen to be leaving the club. A year after he said that, he's on Turkey. So as much as I started this by pointing out the fact that the agent did mess up massively here, he's not the only one. Napoli's not happy with this situation either, and there's no way Victor Osimhen's happy with this situation. Literally everybody is unhappy with this situation in the way that it is all played out. Because if you are sitting there confidently claiming that you're going to be able to get 200 million for a player, and then all of a sudden you're kind of letting him walk just because somebody's agreed to pay the new exorbitant wage you've given him, which by, frigging English standards is not exorbitant. It's like half of what Erling Haaland's being paid. I mean, allegedly being paid. That might be caught up in one of the charges, but you get the idea. I mean, there were reports right here. He'd turned down 140 million euros from Al Hilal, that Victor Osimhen had turned that down. Well, now I have to imagine that's an offer he would have even been accepting. Hell, it was even in January the president went so far as to publicly proclaim Osimhen would join Real Madrid, PSG, or an English team during the summer transfer window. And this brings us to the logistics of what actually happened this summer. I'd heard the rumors that it was probably going to be an English club, maybe a Liverpool, Chelsea, United. But apparently Victor Osimhen contributed to his own one-year hiatus and demise because Liverpool said they were put off by their wage demands, and even Chelsea, yes, throw money all over the place, Chelsea could not come to an agreement on personal terms with Osimhen according to the reports around it, which means Victor Osimhen was asking for silly, maybe even Erling Haaland level money, which I love Victor Osimhen. He's also not Erling Haaland scoring a billion hat tricks every week. That's not something that, the Dark Knight is going to be able to pull off, even if he does have a cool face mask and all. Those types of wage demands, the depression in the market meant that Saudi offer was basically the only thing that was on the table. But then, of course, the Saudi offer couldn't be agreed because there was a difference of $5 million in terms of valuation or whatever. That left them with basically no options as they creeped their way towards the end. But here's what really surprises me. I don't know exactly how Galatasaray ended up being the only option. If you would get to a point where Victor Osimhen's made it entirely clear he does not want to play at Napoli, right? It is time for him to move. The squad's planned for him to move. Romelu Lukaku is already in that spot. Right? There has got to be a team that would do more to increase his value than Galatasaray. A team in a top 5 league that you could loan him to for a season. The only thing I can think of is that Napoli didn't want to reward any of the teams that actually had a shot to sign Victor Osimhen long term by giving him to them short term. So they needed to find a team that was going to be able to give him European football and compete in a good league, but also not reward a team for not paying the fee, right? Like, or not agreeing to personal terms with Osimhen. Because what they didn't want to do is get out negotiated, basically. Like, if you end up loaning him to Chelsea for a year and Chelsea just has to pay his wage, well, the wage that they would have to pay in order to cover his wage at Napoli is way lower than his personal terms, and they obviously didn't have to buy him on transfer. So you're like incentivizing these teams to have to come out and buy Victor Osimhen next year. It is a move essentially designed to buy time. But what it also is just crazy. I mean, if you had told somebody even 3 months ago that Victor Osimhen was going to be on loan in the Turkish league, they wouldn't have believed you. In fact, they would have thought that you were, like a United fan or someone else delusional, like a Chelsea fan or a, Tottenham fan. You could really fill in any club there. The joke would probably still land exactly the same. So I'm not going after one specific club anyways. But no, seriously, there is no reason that you would have ever thought that that was possible. And I said there were no winners in this. There is one. Obviously, it's fucking Galatasaray. They have fallen on their ass and landed in a pot of gold here because they've just pulled one of the 10 best strikers on the planet out of their ass in this transfer window. And all they had to do was pay his wage, right? Which is something that, like, look, you're talking 9 to 12 million a year. That's something that a club like Galatasaray, constantly in Europe, won the Turkish league last year. That's something they can foot. They can foot the bill for that. That's not something that's out of the price range, right? That is reasonable considering the amount that guy's going to improve the team, and also considering they are now up against Jose Mourinho at Fenerbahce. So you need some reinforcements. Well, how about going and getting a guy who's just going to be the best player in the Turkish league without a doubt at all? The result is a complete holding pattern. He's agreed a contract that runs through, I believe it was 2026, but I want to make sure on that. Yeah, his contract's through 2026, which means going into next offseason, he is going to be going into the last year of his contract, which also means Napoli struck out. Napoli had a player that anybody worth their salt was willing to pay over $100 million for if they could scrap that money together. They had an offer on the table for 140 million euros they couldn't convince Osimhen to take, and now they're probably not going to get anywhere near that. They're going to get like Erling Haaland money maybe next summer, because a lot of teams, I would imagine, and if I was in charge of one of those teams, I would be doing this, realize Osimhen's going to be going into the last year of his contract, realize that they really like the player, and that under FFP, it's a hell of a lot easier to get 50 million together than 150 million, right? Like, it's just way easier that way. You sell one or two guys to Saudi or cut some wage, and all of a sudden you have that accessible under FFP, and Napoli is going to be left with only one choice. They have to sell him. If they don't sell him, Victor Osimhen will leave on a free in 2 years, and he will end up getting the last laugh anyways, which means they have to sell him next summer. And anytime you have to sell a player, you're in trouble. You're not anywhere near where you wanted to be. Napoli fumbled a huge bag, and Victor Osimhen fumbled a year, maybe multiple years of his career. And Victor Osimhen's agent has come out looking completely incompetent because he wasn't able to see this coming. If you're the agent, you got to be mapping this out. But seriously, just the amount of fumbling. I mean, this is the equivalent of that meme where the girl, invites you into her room because you need to charge your phone, and you look down at your phone and you say, oh, it's on 98%. I don't need to charge it. And then, when you wake up the next morning, you think about it again and you just go, oh, like every single person in this story except for Galatasaray has fumbled that badly. But just imagine the girl was like Dua Lipa or something. Or, it's the 21st century. Imagine whoever the hell you want. Ryan Gosling. I don't know. Honestly, he looked really good in that movie, Fall Guy. I watched it on the plane. Would. That movie, just straight dumpster fire, though. So bad. That movie was so bad. Solid plane watch, terrible movie. I also watched Challengers on the plane, which was basically softcore. So that was a little weird. Anyways, I think by the time we've hit that topic, we're done here. This transfer was weird as hell. And everybody comes out looking real stupid. Napoli went from winning the league to being absolutely mudded real fast.